Okay, so as Josh explained, so my name is Timothy. My wife Alice, she's here with us, and we came here on Monday. No, Tuesday, because we had a retreat till Monday, and then Tuesday we came here, and so I'm so thankful to be here in Boston with all of you, and I look forward to getting to know you over the next couple of months. And I wanted to say hi to GP Online because some of those people are going to be tuning in later on. Okay, so as Josh explained, I'm peers with Manny and Alice is peers with Sunny. And then our girls, because we both have two daughters each, so they're good friends as well. One additional fun fact is that my mom and Manny's mom are also college peers. And so we didn't know that while we were going through college. And then at our graduation, they all came up and then they were attending our church that Sunday. And then they recognized each other. Wait, are you, so-and-so? And, oh, yeah, I'm so-and-so. And so they reconnected after many, many years. And so it turns out that they were also peers back in Korea where they attended college. And so we have three generations of friends. And so it's also good to be here in Boston because, in a sense, I'm coming home. So I was born in Boston, and then I lived here till I was age 2. So I don't remember anything, and then we moved to Korea. But because I was born in Boston, I would always tell my friends, wherever we are, whether we're in Korea, whether we later came back to U.S. and lived in L.A., it doesn't matter. I would always say, I'm from Boston. And then my dad, because he lived in Boston for several years, he was always a Boston sports fan. So I grew up, cheering for the Celtics, Red Sox, Patriots, and all of that. And you know how they say that persecution really purifies the faith of the church, right? So if you guys study church history, and so that was my experience as a Celtics fan, okay? Those are my peers, Pastor Manny and then Matthew, so we're three of us left from class of 92. So I grew up in the 80s in LA, and so if you guys remember the NBA, or it's just before your time, but anyway, this is Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, and that was intense rivalry between Boston and LA. But I'm in LA. All my friends are Laker fans. And then when it came to playoffs and when they would meet each other, I was cheering for the Celtics. And they're like, what's wrong with you? And I said, I'm from Boston. So I was deeply, intensely persecuted for my loyalty to the Celtics, but that only purified my loyalty and faith. So to this day, I'm a Celtics fan. So by the way, this has nothing to do with what I'm going to preach on today. So that's just some background. And so today what I thought I would give today's message is give you a little bit more about my own background, my own testimony, along with going through one of my favorite Bible texts. So we're not going to do the Hebrews. I know Pastor Manny's been on Hebrews, but we're going to do something different. So it's going to be a kind of a standalone message on Luke 19. Okay, so let me go ahead and just read it for us, and then you can just kind of follow along. Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled, he has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Okay, so this is a text that I'm going to be covering today, and it's a very rich text and so descriptive. You can kind of picture the scene in your mind, and it's only, turns out, 10 verses. But the way that Luke records this account, it's such a rich story. And so that's what I want to go over this with you. And, it's one of my favorite passages. Zacchaeus is one of my favorite characters. In heaven, I'm going to seek him out because I want to meet Mr. Zacchaeus. And he's one of my favorites because I can really relate to him. And some of you are thinking, yeah, because look at you, you're short and he's short, and so that's why you can relate to him. So that's true enough, right? I mean, we're both short, but there are other ways in which I could really relate to him. And I think it's more having to do with kind of sort of his outlook on life, his approach to life. I think in many sense, what motivated Zacchaeus, I could really understand and I could really relate to him. So just to give you a little bit more background, Zacchaeus was, as we read, he was a tax collector. I think in any society, if you work as a tax collector, if you work for the government collecting taxes, you're not going to be popular, right? You're not going to be popular with your neighbors. And so if you have a neighbor here in your home, in your apartment, and you find out that they work for the IRS, you're going to be a little bit distant. You're going to be polite and respectful, but you don't want to get too close to this neighbor lest, I don't know, they say, hey, can I audit your taxes or something like that? So you want to kind of keep a distance and all of that. And so that's true of any society, but back then, it was especially true that the tax collectors were the most hated of their society. And here's the reason why. Back then, the way that they were all under the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire had conquered Israel, and then the way that the Roman government worked was, hey, we will hire the local citizen of that town because they know the people the best, and you will work for us, and your pay will be, we just want a certain amount from your town, and you collect that however way you want, and anything that you collect above that, that's your income, that's your pay. So if you got to think about that, that's just an invitation for corruption, right? And so basically, they were like licensed mafia, right? They were basically the licensed gangsters with the backing of the Roman government. And so you could imagine that they were the most hated of their community. Nobody liked the tax collectors. And so here you have a line of work where, in any society, of course, people like money. Everybody wants more money. And so, yeah, I think people are willing to do a lot to get more money. But even if that's the case, most people say, yeah, I like money. I want to earn a lot of money, but there are limits. I'm not going to cross that line, even if it means more money. And there's always a subset of people who say, not me. I'll do anything for money. And those were the tax collectors. That's Zacchaeus. And so in Luke 19, verse 2, we're told that not only was Zacchaeus a tax collector, he was the chief tax collector of no smaller place than Jericho, which was a major city. It's like being the chief tax collector of Boston today. It's a pretty high position. And if you think about it, it's very interesting that Zacchaeus, who's this short man, would rise to become the chief tax collector of a large city like Jericho. Because, you just based upon my description of how tax collectors worked back then, you expect the people who were to be really successful in this career, they're the guys named Vinny or Bruno, right? I mean, they're the guys who are like 6'5", 250 pounds, all muscle, right? They're the guys who are going to thrive in this line of work. And yet you have this little guy, Zacchaeus. And so when he first showed up in Jericho, I'm sure the people in Jericho were happy that Zacchaeus was their tax collector. And they said, oh, we got such a cute little tax collector. And maybe they greeted him in that way. But soon, I think they must have found out that what Zacchaeus lacked in physical height and prowess, he must have made up with extra ruthlessness, extra being cold-hearted. And so he rose to become chief tax collector of Jericho. And soon enough, I'm sure the Jericho residents found out, you do not mess with Zacchaeus. And when they saw him from a distance, they must have run the opposite way because of the kind of person that he was. And it's not hard for me to imagine kind of the mindset of Zacchaeus and what drove him, because in a way, I feel like I grew up in what I imagine Zacchaeus' home must have been like. and some of their dinner conversations around the Zacchaeus household, I think it's kind of like the dinner conversations that I grew up with as a kid. And so let me explain to you a bit more. So there's a picture here of me and my dad here. My dad, he passed away several years ago, but he was a very successful man. He went to Korea, he studied at Seoul National, he was a mechanical engineer there. Then he came to grad school here to America, he went to MIT, he got his master's here. And then he went on to have a very successful career. And even to this day, you can Google the patent for industrial Velcro, and then his name appears because he patented that years ago. And so that was my dad. And growing up, he would impress upon me and my older sister that you have to succeed in life. And because of his particular background, basically his formula for success that he just drilled into me and my sister ever since we were little is that you have to go to a good college. That's not good enough. You have to go on to get a PhD from an elite school. And then you can launch yourself into a successful career, making a lot of money so that you can buy a big home and all of those things. And so that was the formula for success that I grew up with. And it wasn't just my dad's. Soon enough, it became my own. I really owned that. I really had deep conviction that that was how I'm going to succeed in life. And so this is me when I was, I think, like 5 or 6 or something like that, looking kind of unhappy there. Yeah. So, and you'll notice I'm like Zacchaeus. I'm the shortest kid in this picture, and it's easy to spot me in any of my class pictures because you always sit by height, right? So I'm always in the front row where the shortest kids are. I'm dead center where the shortest kid is, right? So I'm always in the front row, dead center. So I was always the shortest kid growing up, and still am in many sense. But it wasn't just, I was not just short in terms of my height. I felt short in many ways. I was never like particularly talented, so like I don't play any musical instruments. I don't dance. I don't sing. I was never one of these people that how there's some people who walk into a room and everybody wants to be their friend, right? I think Pastor Manny's like that. He's just, ever since I've known him and since college, like everybody wants to be his friend because he's so cheerful and fun and all of that. And that was never my case. I'm introverted and quiet. And so in many sense, I felt that I was short. And given the fact that we live in a world that doesn't reward sort of the short people, right? It's a dog-eat-dog world after all. And I wasn't always the smartest either. There would always be kids who were smarter than me in class and all of that. And so I grew up kind of with a chip on the shoulder that many short people, at least for me, grew up with. And because I knew that I was not the smartest and I knew that I was not the most talented, the mentality that I adopted early on is, I will show you. And I will show you by outworking you. You might be smarter than me, your IQ might be higher than me, but I'll show you because in the end, I will outwork you. And just to give you a little vintage story that it kind of gives you a snapshot of my life growing up. And so, I mentioned to you that I have an older sister, so that's her in the picture, 3 years older than me. When she was 10th grade, so then I was entering into 7th grade, she took the PSAT. You guys remember that in high school? Because you take that in 10th grade. And being the typical, Korean American, stereotypical Korean American, she did well enough on her math, but she did horribly on the English section, right? And then so, it really humbled her and it really stunned her, actually. And then I remember her response when she got her score. And then she came to me, her little brother, 3 years below her, and said, okay, you're going to take the PSAT 3 years later. And if you want to do well on this PSAT, let me give you some advice as your older sister. You better start studying now. She's telling me this. I'm 12 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. And then she gave me the privilege of studying from her Barron's SAT study guide, right? I think they still have this. They had another cover. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it, but they still had this. And I felt like she was giving me the key to success because the Barron's guide, among all the other SAT guides, had 3,000 vocabulary words that were most frequently come out on the SAT. And then I vowed as a 7th grader, I'm going to memorize all 3,000 words. And so here's what I did. In the morning, I would wake up, and then getting ready for school, I would take just a random piece of paper like this, because I was cheap and all that. And I would just take a piece of paper like this, and then I would write down 5 words, right? So obeys, abash, abdicate, adjourn, obeyer. And I would write those down, right? And I would write down little definitions for it. And then just throughout the day, I would memorize those 5 words. And so it doesn't matter what part of the day. So I don't know how it was for you during PE, but my PE uniform, there was no pockets. No problem. I stuffed it in my sock, right? I stuffed it in my sock so that I could keep it with me because I'm not going to put it in the locker room. I got to study, right? And so whenever there was any downtime, so, waiting between basketball game, my turn to go in or whatever, I would pull out from my sock and start memorizing these words. And my friends would, give me that. What are you doing? And I would say, I'm studying these words because we need to study these words in order to do well on the PSAT, which is coming 3 years later. And I felt like my words of warning fell on deaf ears on my friends. And I felt like an Old Testament prophet, just trying to warn them, this is coming, guys. And they just thought I was so weird. They just could not understand. Like, whatever, you're so weird. And they just brushed me off. And so that was a vintage snapshot of how I was growing up. I was nerd of nerds, and I was driven. And so I think I have good reasons when I say that I think I understand what must have driven Zacchaeus. And I think had we been friends or had we been classmates at school, I think we would have been best friends, Zacchaeus and I. I think we would have really understood each other. And so that's a little bit of how I grew up. And let me ask you, though, how are you when it comes to feeling short? So I've been doing college ministry, youth ministry now for about 30 years. I graduated in 92, and so since then I've been involved in student ministry. And over the 30 plus years, one thing has been a consistent experience. When I meet a new student, and depending on their background and whatever, some of them are tall, some of them are really good looking, athletic, and smart, and all of that, and just the complete package. But then as I get to know them better, I realize that it doesn't matter how impressive you are in terms of your credentials and how you look and all of that and put together. Everybody feels short about something. It could be their family background, it might be their finances, it might be some parent kind of backstory, it might be some sibling, it might be some sin in their past. But everybody, no matter how they look on the outside, feels short. And as I get to know them, then they kind of open up and tell me about what are the areas in which they feel short about. And so let me ask you, what is that for you? What is it that about yourself that you feel short? That I don't measure up compared to other people because of this area of my life? And it is not surprising that this experience that I'm describing of not measuring up, feeling short, is universal. And it's not surprising because according to the Bible, the underlying cause of that is a spiritual condition. As it says in Romans 3, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, fall short of God's standards. And it actually uses that actual words, fall short. And I think it's a spiritual condition that we all can resonate with. And so because of this, it is a universal experience. And so for me, just to kind of continue on with my story, so fast forward, 12th grade, high school, as I was applying to colleges and getting responses from the colleges, I was very happy at where I got into, and I ended up going to Berkeley like a lot of the mentors here, and that was one of my dream schools growing up. And I did not do this, but I was tempted to. You know those friends who made fun of me in 7th grade for studying those words? I wanted to ask them in 12th grade, where are you going for college? Or where did you get into? But I didn't do that. Okay, so anyways, so I did that, and so I got what I wanted. But this was my experience after getting what I wanted. And I still remember this. Senior year, spring semester, I had heard back from the colleges. I decided I'm going to go to Berkeley, engineering, which is the major I wanted to get into. And I remember laying on my bed at night, getting ready to fall asleep. And then I would be just engulfed by a thought of, this is all so meaningless. This feels so empty. Even though I was getting what I'd wanted and what I'd worked hard for. And so I kind of just pushed it aside, saying, well, I guess I feel this way because I'm not in college yet, and when I go there, then maybe things will be different. And so that was my experience. And this is the experience of Zacchaeus. He was seeking to see who Jesus was, even though he was successful, chief tax collector of Jericho. And so why do you suppose that a man like Zacchaeus, given his background, given his success, would even want to see Jesus, this religious teacher, this rabbi? And so I would like for you to talk about that. So why don't you spend just a minute or so talking with the people seated next to you. And if you don't know them, please introduce yourselves and discuss, why would a person like Zacchaeus want to see Jesus, as Luke tells us here? Okay, if I could ask you to wrap up. So everything in this text tells us that there's something in the way that he acts. I think it's very clear that Zacchaeus had reached a point in his life where he concluded, something is really broken about my life. There's something very wrong about my life, right? I think that's very obvious. And I'm not sure what you guys came up with in terms of as you guys discussed it with one another. And I know this is not in the Bible and things like that, but I have some guesses on what might have contributed to Zacchaeus feeling this way. So maybe one guess that I have is guilt. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you can only live your life so long, cheating people, taking advantage of people just because you're stronger than them, and continue to live that way. And so maybe over the years, that guilt which is accumulating and reached a point where he felt like, I can't do this. Another guess that I have, and it's just pure speculation, of course it's not here in the Bible, is maybe fatherhood, right? I mean, maybe, by this time he's in his 30s and in his 40s, and perhaps fatherhood really began to affect Zacchaeus' thinking. And so just kind of, I fancifully imagine that Zacchaeus had a son. And What does he name his son? Zacchaeus Jr., right? So there's Zacchaeus Jr. And then Zacchaeus Jr. grows up, starts going to elementary school, maybe kindergarten, maybe first grade. One day, Zacchaeus Jr. comes back from school, and his hair's all matted. He's got a black eye. He's got some bruises on his face. He goes, son, what happened? Oh, Dad, you're not going to believe what happened. I was at school today, and those bullies in my class, they started making fun of me. And yeah, I can ignore that, and yeah, I just not let that bother me. But then they started making fun of you. And they started calling you names. And they said that you were some dirty tax collector. And that what you did is no good and you're a bad guy. And I said, you take that back. He's my dad. He is not a bad guy. But they refused. And so I got into a fight. And Dad, what does a tax collector do anyway? And maybe just that sense of, I'm raising a child now, and he's going to become like me. Maybe that began to eat away and gnaw away at Zacchaeus. And so we're not told why, but we know he was desperate to see Jesus, right? I mean, he does this really extreme thing. I mean, he's very resourceful, but he does this extreme thing of running ahead and climbing a tree so that he could see Jesus because the crowd was in his way. You think about this. You don't need a seminary degree to know. Nobody does this. No grown man runs in public unless like it's in a gym or something like that, right? No, because it's undignified. It's embarrassing. No grown man climbs a tree. Can you imagine your own dads doing that? Like in public, like you would say, down, get down. You're embarrassing me. Get down, Dad. Right? I mean, can you imagine your dad doing this? This is embarrassing. You're making a fool of yourself. And he was that desperate to see Jesus. And so from my own experience, I know what it feels like to be that desperate. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of resume and pick up where I left off in my own story. So I get to Berkeley my freshman year, and that's one of the engineering building pictures there. And I was so proud and arrogant, I thought that when I got to Berkeley, freshman year, fall semester, beginning of the school year, that within the first semester, everybody will know. Everybody will know what? Everybody will know that I am the god of engineering and that I am going to quickly establish myself on that campus, and everybody will just start bowing down to me as you are the god of engineering, right? That's how self-deluded I was. So what happened was, that was the furthest from the truth. When I got to Berkeley, I quickly realized that every student there is the smartest in their high school. And that in that crowd, I was just average. Just solidly mediocre average. And that was just a rude awakening, my first set of midterms. And not only did I just get utterly humbled when it came to academics, but I had trouble making friends, I felt homesick, I was lonely. And that what I described to you earlier, that sense of this is all so meaningless. I feel so empty. In high school, if that was sort of like a background soundtrack and maybe on a volume, that was maybe like 3 or 4 when I was a high school senior. Freshman year, that was like 9 or 10. It was constant. I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I felt like, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard so that I can get into that top grad school like my dad wants me to do? Why am I doing that? So that I can get into a top job after that? Why am I doing that? So that one day I could retire comfortably? Why am I doing that? So that I could die. So I'm doing all of this so that I could die one day comfortably. And it just seems so empty. And then that sense of emptiness began to gnaw away at me, and I began to sense that formula for success that my dad had drilled into me since I was a kid was a lie. And I began to sense that I had been living for a lie. Now, as I was thinking about this, I'm an 18-year-old thinking these thoughts. I thought, okay, so maybe I'm not feeling all fulfilled and whatever because maybe I'm just a mediocre student. So maybe it's not the formula for success, but maybe it's just me that's the problem. And so I decided, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at those people who did succeed according to my dad's formula for success. And so as I kind of looked around, it was my professors at Berkeley who were the mechanical engineering professors at Cal. And if you are a professor of mechanical engineering at Berkeley, that meant you are the cream of the crop. Not in my wildest imagination of success did I ever think that I could be where they were at. And so I began to look at their lives more closely. I wanted to look at them and say, are they fulfilled? Are they happy? Do they have joy? And I didn't see any of that. All they cared about was their ego, their ambition, their pride, their next journal publication. And when it came to freshmen like me who couldn't help them with any of that, they couldn't care less about me. And they made that very clear. And I didn't see joy, I didn't see fulfillment, I didn't see love. I just saw a lot of selfishness and unhappiness in their lives. It was all over their face. And so this only accentuated that I had been living for a lie. It has been once said that the loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it has just let you down. That was my freshman year. And I would like for you to ask and to discuss, for you, have you ever found yourself asking, is there a purpose for my life? Why do I feel so empty even after getting what I wanted? Why am I working so hard? And I realize this is a little bit more personal question than the first discussion question, but if you feel comfortable, or to the degree that you feel comfortable, please go ahead and discuss this right now with those seated around you. Okay. All right, if I could ask you to wrap up again. Okay, I think we all go through these moments where we experience, like, why am I doing all this? Is there a purpose behind all this? This feels so empty. And for Zacchaeus, he reaches that point, and he goes and finds Jesus. And then, he climbs up the tree like we talked about. And then to his utter surprise, to his utter shock, I think, as he's up there in the tree looking at Jesus from afar, Jesus makes a beeline to the very tree that he's sitting on. And he says, Zacchaeus, hurry, come down, for I must stay at your house today." Such warmth, right? Such familiarity. Like, how does he even know his name? And yet he says, "Yeah, you. I've been looking for you. Come down." It's like if you've ever lost something very precious to you, like your phone or keys, something like that, and finally you find it under the chair. Like, "Oh, there you are, my phone. I've been looking for you." It's kind of like that kind of, he is so happy to find Zacchaeus. And up to this point, Zacchaeus thought, "Oh, I'm the one who's seeking to see Jesus." But here he discovers it's actually the other way around. And in the Greek version, this is actually more highlighted because it's the same word. In verse 3, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. And in verse 10, the end of this section, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. It's the same word that's used. And I think it really highlights the fact that Jesus is the one who was seeking to find Zacchaeus. And how do we know that? Well, in verse 1, we are told that, and we read that earlier, that Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And where was he passing through to? Well, if you continue to read Luke 19, in the latter part of that chapter, we read the account of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. This is his last trip going into Jerusalem, and a few days later, of course, he's going to be crucified on the cross. And so this really is Jesus' last opportunity to connect with Zacchaeus. And I think he must have gone through Jericho many other times. And it is my guess that Jesus, must have been scanning the crowd at Jericho before, looking for Zacchaeus. Where is Zacchaeus? And this, knowing that this is the very last time he was going to go through Jericho because he's on his way to die. When Jesus saw Zacchaeus on that tree, Jesus makes a beeline for him. And he says, "Zacchaeus, there you are. I am so glad you're there. Come down. I'm coming to your place tonight." It's that kind of response. He is so delighted to see Zacchaeus because, as Jesus said, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And Zacchaeus had no idea the cost involved in order for the Son of Man to come and seek and save the lost. But Jesus did. He knew that he was on his way to die on the cross to make it possible for the Zacchaeuses of the world, to make it possible for you and for me to be found by God. And Jesus was willing to pay that price. And so he says, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. This is why I came into this world. People like you, Zacchaeus. And so, just to kind of wrap up my story. So my freshman year, I'm experiencing major, existential crisis. Like, why am I doing all this? I thought this was my purpose for living, but it's clearly not, and all those things. And I'd grown up going to church. So ever since I was elementary school, not because I wanted to go to church, but because my mom would force me and my sister to go to church every Sunday. And then, we attended a Korean church where everything was done in Korean, and my Korean is terrible. It's like kindergarten level. And so I didn't know most of what was going on at church. The pastor message was way over my head, all of those things. And so going into college, I made a personal vow. When I get to college, I'm going to do the bare minimum when it comes to church. I'll still go to church 1 hour on Sunday, but the rest of the week, I'm never going to step foot in the church. I'm never going to go to a Bible study. Well, when I was going through all of that crisis and going, why am I doing this? I feel so empty and purposeless and all of that. A good friend of mine, who I knew from high school, same college, he said, "Hey, why don't you come to Friday Bible study with me?" And I said, "Oh, no. I'm never going to go to Bible study and all of that." But then as I experienced more and more of that acute sense of emptiness and loneliness, I said, "Okay, I'll go to that Bible study with you. That was my equivalent of climbing a tree. Like, I'm never going to do that, but I'll go to that Bible study with you. And even though I had grown up going to church, and even though I had grown up, somewhat reading the Bible, I still remember freshman year walking into 101 Morgan, which is a building at Berkeley, Friday Bible study, sitting down. And I wasn't like the good students here. I would always be in the back. The pastor would go up and start teaching from the Bible. And even though I was sort of in the last row, I felt like it was the crowd had cleared out. And it was the pastor and me, one-on-one. And he's just sharing from the Bible about God's love, about what's going on in my heart, my sinfulness, my deception, my self-delusion, my pride. And I felt like God was just opening up a mirror saying, look. And I was seeing myself with such piercing accuracy, with such a sense of, how do you know me, God? And as I heard about God who knows me, but still God who loves me enough to send his son Jesus to die for me, I was so excited. And I remember my dorm was uphill. So after Bible study, me and my friend, a friend who had invited me to that Bible study, we would walk up that hill, and we were excitedly talking about what we learned at Bible study that night. And I would tell my friend, his name was Albert, if what we're learning is true, if what that pastor just said, if this is really true, then this changes everything. This explains why I feel so empty and purposeless, because I had missed this entire gigantic truth. I was created to be in this relationship with God. And I was so excited. And then eventually, long story short, sophomore year, I became a Christian. And that changed my life. And for Zacchaeus, this encounter with Jesus also changed his life. So we're not told what they talked about as Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house, but we know the end result. It changed his life. It was life transforming. He says, Lord, half of my goods I give to the poor. If I've defrauded anyone of anything, he's a tax collector. That's like a mafia saying, if I did anything illegal, I mean, it's like, that's all he does, right? I restored fourfold, which, by the way, is double what the Bible prescribes. If you cheat somebody and you're caught, the punishment was you have to double it. He says, I'll do it fourfold. And so when Zacchaeus does this, he's going to become poor, right? He gives half of his money to the poor, and then with the rest, he has to give people fourfold. Before, when people saw Zacchaeus, they ran away. Now when they see Zacchaeus, they come running to him. Zacchaeus, there you are. I've been looking all over for you. Oh, by the way, you cheated me. Oh, did I? I'm so sorry. Yeah, $1,000. Okay, here's $4,000. He was a transformed man. He had this life-changing encounter with Jesus. I had a life-changing encounter with Jesus. So before I lived for success, my formula for success, all of that thing, I wanted to be a successful engineer, all of that. Well, God changed my life starting sophomore year. And the trajectory of my life has so transformed from what I expected as an 18-year-old freshman. So here's a picture of our youth group back in DMV area. And there I am. I'm still short, right? I'm still one of the shortest in the crowd. I was doing youth ministry back in DMV. And I have been thoroughly loving it. And I always say God has a sense of humor because most pastors, they go to seminary and then they start in youth ministry first, like 24, 25, and then they become kind of like a regular pastor to regular people like you. But me, I started out being a regular pastor to regular people like you, and then I became a youth pastor for the first time in my life at age 49. So it was, God did this really interesting thing in my life. And now I cannot compare. It's night and day. I can't believe that I get to do this for a living. Sharing people God's love. Telling them what their purpose in life, what they were created by God to do. And helping them to grow in their faith. This is the most fulfilling ever that I could not have imagined was possible when I was that 18-year-old laying awake at night on my bed saying, this feels so empty and purposeless. Now I feel so full, so fulfilled in what I am doing. And so I just really want to encourage all of you to continue to seek after God, whether you're a Christian or not, to continue to pursue after Him, because this is the most fulfilling, the most rewarding, the most amazing life ever. And God totally changed my life in college years. And I believe that God can do the same in yours as well. Okay, so let me just go ahead and give you some opportunity to kind of reflect and think about the message that I just shared with you. And so I just have some prompts prepared for you. So what are ways that you have tried to make up for the shortness in your life? So what are those areas that you feel short about? What has been the result of your efforts to make up for that shortness? What are some ways that you have experienced Jesus seeking after you? So maybe you're like me. Maybe you said in college, I'm going to stay away from church, and yet here you are, right? And maybe that is a sign that God is seeking after you. And why don't we pray a prayer of gratitude as well? So let me just give you some time to just personally reflect, and you can maybe jot down your responses in your notes. And then I'm going to have the band come up and lead us in a closing song after we have some time to reflect, and then I'll come back and pray.